back to the channel. I am still working on figuring out the channel to look and all of that fun stuff. But we will get there eventually. So I kind of want to display, you know, like my manga and my games and like fun, cool stuff. My Sword of the Creator, which one of you commented on, which is really cool that you noticed. So yeah, I'm working on it. Anyways, I just wanted to thank you guys for the huge influx of, at least to me, I know, like, you know, to me this is a huge influx of subscribers, so thank you guys so much. To me that it's been huge. Like I got like 40 in like a month or two, which is just wild. So yeah, thank you guys so much for subscribing, and thank you to everyone who's, you know, been subscribed to me and stuck with me through my break and all of that. You guys are all awesome, and you're all so nice in your comments, and I really appreciate it. You know, when I started this, I didn't know if I would gain any traction or if anyone would care about anything I had to say. So it's pretty cool that you guys like talking or like listening and kind of, you know, talking to me through the comments, if you will. It's really cool. So thank you. In this video, I wanted to talk about, because you guys really seem to like my video game or like sort of like reviews and analysis of stuff. I thought I would kind of add that in a little bit more along with anime and talk about more of the character writing side of things. So for this one, and I'm sorry I have my phone, but I took notes, so if you see me looking down, it's this handy dandy notebook. If you get that reference, you were probably also born in the 90s. So for this one, I want to talk about the best written characters in Switch JRPGs. So I think what I'm gonna do, because this is going to contain spoilers for the games I talk about, is I will sort of warn you in advance what the game is. I'll put like chapters, so you can skip if you don't want to know anything beyond the game. Like if it was me, I would be like, oh, okay, cool, I'll check out that game later. So I'll give you like a little blurb, and then I'll get into the spoiler territory, just so you obviously don't get spoiled, because I would hate that for you, because I'm going to talk about some really cool stuff that happened. So, I mean, if you want to be spoiled, that's also fine, and, you know, do what you will, do what you want, but just kind of a warning. So we'll start. So the very first game I want to talk about is Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but specifically Torna. I feel like that's the really, really strong writing, for me personally at least. And I mean, Xenoblade 2, I think, had a lot of the like bones of the strong writing, but then a lot of that fleshed out character development that I was really curious about happened in Torna. So now getting into spoiler territory. Oh, well, actually, before I get into that, so the characters that I think were written very well are Jin, Mithra, Pyra, and an honorable mention to Laura. So now I'm getting into spoilers, so go to the next chapter if you haven't played this. So for me, I think the very first character I put, and I couldn't just put one, but was Jin. I think he is written so well. You know, you really see him, or I really saw him as a villain, and he's just so intriguing to me because he's still a villain through the entire game, really, until the very end. But he I don't know, he just has this very intriguing story, and I found him and Laura's story just so heartbreaking. I think if you'll find, for me, I just find my favorite characters that are written well are ones that have some kind of conflict or struggle that is just really painful, and they have to make a difficult choice. And sometimes you could say the choice was the right choice, and sometimes you could say the choice was the wrong choice. And Jin is so interesting to me because he's like a true idealist. He like sort of like is really into love and loving one person basically your entire life. And I 100% relate to that. I'm a big believer in love and idealism and all these things. But what's so fascinating to me about Jin is he kind of took the path of like sort of corruption. I mean, I think if I remember, I think Laura just said, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think she said, you know, I wish we could be together forever. And from what I'm remembering, Jin took that literally and was like, okay. And when she died, he took her, I think her heart, and became a flesh eater. And I just found that really fascinating. Like, he was like, oh, I love this person. Because to me, I would think, you know, this is really painful. I'm never gonna move on from this, but like I have to just try to like get through the feelings, right? And like do the best I can to deal with this really horrible situation. But Jin, he and I could see the temptation, right, of like wanting that person to stay, or like a piece of them to stay with you, because nothing else could stay with him, obviously. But I kind of see it as I don't know, you know, I think it's so interesting. This is why I think it's so interesting. It's a very morally gray situation, isn't it? Because she's already dead. So it's not like he's, from what I remember, I hope I'm remembering this right. She's already dead, so it's not like he's killing her. But I don't know if that's what Laura would have wanted. And I think he always wanted to bring her back. And I don't know if that's what Laura would have wanted either. So that's sort of where I grapple with like the ethical dilemma of Jin. And so anyways, I just find Jin so interesting because that's really all he cares about is, I think, being with Laura again. But he's doing all these other things with Malos basically out of like, not dread, out of despair. So he's a character of despair, and I just find him fascinating. The other character I found fascinating, especially in Xenoblade 2, and then like it was cool kind of seeing the progression, was like I was saying, Pyra and Mithra. Because, you know, obviously you start out and it's just Pyra, and you're like, wow, she's really friendly and nice and whatever. And then Mithra shows up, and Mithra is like a completely different side. And you're going in thinking, oh, Pyra is like the original person, and Mithra is like a split or whatever. And then you eventually figure out, obviously, that Pyra is the split sort of personality. And I just thought that was really interesting how they took like the concept of split personalities and kind of like put it into a person, but then it's not a person, it's actually like a robot, kind of. And then like the final form, can't remember the name, but you know what I mean, is sort of like her, I'm guessing, like the original her, or is Mithra the original her? I'm still not sure on that. Someone tell me if you know. But I found her fascinating because, yeah, she was sort of, I related a lot more to Mithra. She's more sassy, she's more direct. Sometimes she knows what she wants to do, but she doesn't always, it's not always the right decision. She, you know, that kind of a thing. She sometimes is less collaborative, I think, than Pyra. And so it was so fascinating to me how Mithra goes from, okay, like, you know, the situation with Torna is all my fault, so I'm just going, which obviously it wasn't all her fault, but that's what she's thinking. It's all my fault, so I'm just going to completely change everything about myself. And I think that's a very, even though she's a kind of a robot or a computer chip, I think that's a very, like, human thing to do. And I do think trauma changes you, but it was just so drastic and so interesting to see sort of a non-human entity have like a personality split, and then become sort of like two different people is what I think it implies later on. So yeah, that's what I have to say about Xenoblade 2, which I already took 11 minutes. Maybe I should have made this a video just on that. So anyways, let's go to the next character. So Xenoblade 1, again, really great rating. By the way, I promise this isn't all Xenoblade, just the first 3, because they all have really interesting characters. So for me, we'll get into spoiler territory. Okay, that's right, I'm gonna say that character first. So for me in Xenoblade 1, the best written character is Zanza. And if you don't know who Zanza is, you should skip ahead to the next one. Unless you want to be spoiled, and then it's fine. So, okay, for me, getting into spoilers, I think Zanza was the most fascinating character, which you probably weren't expecting. I think I just find why villain characters do things kind of intriguing. And I just found Zanza's situation very intriguing and very creative. Where, you know, I just thought it was so interesting to think about if I was put in that situation where I basically destroyed the world and then I could create a new one. But then I also have, like, okay, this is Xenoblade 1 and 2 spoiler, so I also have a personality kind of split. Back to just Xenoblade 1 spoilers. So I just found that very philosophical and fascinating, and how he really, in at least Xenoblade 1, sort of becomes this god-like guy. I mean, literally God. But he becomes very unethical, and he takes it to an extreme. It's just interesting to think how someone who used to be a person could eventually become, and I think they say power corrupts. I don't know if that's always true, but I think with this Zanza in Xenoblade 1 it was true, and it was very fascinating to see that unfold. And also I found in Zanza versus Fiora's god, I forget her name, but was a very interesting dynamic as well, and sort of seeing how you can really take a situation in 2 different ways. You can choose to see life as valuable, or you can choose to see it as expendable, and Zanza definitely chose the expendable option. Alright, on to Xenoblade Chronicles 3. The writing in this is very good. The characters I want to talk about are Mio and Noah. So to get into spoiler territory, I found this kind of like Jin, another really fascinating love story. And what's interesting is Noah is kind of similar, the original, or the earlier Noah, if you will, is kind of similar to Jin in that he's willing to sacrifice everything to sort of keep Mio around, even if she doesn't want to be around anymore. Like all the terror and so like Noah's kind of a villain, the original one, but then you have the new Noah and Mio, and that's really cool to see sort of like how different situations can change the same person and really get them to realize things. Because Mio, it seems like, pretty much no matter what the situation was, realized that you just can't have good things, don't last forever, and eventually they will end, unfortunately. Whereas Noah, I think it took so many situations for him to accept that, which was very fascinating. I think Mio might be the more interesting character to me here, just because she really, like, maybe interesting is the wrong word. I just really respect her as a character. Like, she's very resilient. She really, you know, cares about Noah, but she also sees the bigger picture and sees that it's not worth all of these people dying, and it's not worth the world not continuing on. So she's one of my favorite characters, but I find them both and their dynamic very, very fascinating. Yeah, loved it. Next we have Fire Emblem Three Houses. For me, the first person I put down was Edelgard, but I really had a hard time picking between Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude. So to get into spoilers, sort of here's why. So for me, I think Edelgard I had to put first, just because I don't see that many female nuanced characters in video games like that, and I just loved it. I mean, I immediately picked her out first. I thought that obviously she did evil things, but it was fascinating to me of like why she chose what she did. And she was one of those characters again that had idealism, who wanted to change things, I think, for the better. I would argue a meritocracy is better than a, you were born this way, so you are in this social class. I think that's definitely better. So she had good ideals, but I think she definitely handled it poorly. I think I still wish they would have explored more of like the experiments and her relationship with the those who slither in the dark, because it's still a little hazy for me. But I just thought she was a really well written character, and I loved that, you really could feel the conflict, and you could really see how she wanted to go for it all. And like, yeah, she was just fast. Her and Dimitri too, I found fascinating to kind of segue. Like, I still to this day think back to Dimitri's route, and how he just was still willing at the end to like reach out a hand to Edelgard. But Edelgard, her personality was just like very much about her goals, so much so that she couldn't even take that help when it was given to her, which I found so tragic and so interesting. And like the fact that she was willing to become that tool just to change things is also so fascinating. I would argue she had some serious PTSD from all those experiments, for sure. But yeah, she's a fascinating character, and I sort of wish they actually added even more, which I know they added so much, but Dimitri, I thought was just so interesting, more because I liked watching his progression of, he is so depressed and upset, but there is like he eventually, like, what is it, I guess the catalyst that helps him finally work through not feeling like his life is over, and all this guilt, and sort of feeling like a victim. And I think it was the death of Felix's dad, and also Byleth, and sort of everyone supporting him that helped him get through that. And I think that's very accurate to real life too. I think you need support to get through something as traumatic as what Dimitri went through. And yeah, I found him fascinating, and I found, like I said, him and Edelgard just so, their dynamic just so interesting, because I don't know, it felt like it had that feeling of tragedy. Like they should have been able to work things out. There should have been a route where they could have both like lived. I don't think there was. No. And I think that's just so tragically beautiful, as I always say. So, do I still wish there was a golden route where everyone lived, like in a 3 houses scenario? I didn't do all the 3 hopes routes, maybe there is, but I do wish that. I do. Which, by the way, speaking of, well, I won't go into spoilers for 3 hopes, because you might have not played that. So last but not least, we have Claude. Claude was written extremely well. I think also, and he dealt with so many different issues, like, being like from 2 different nations, being biracial, like that would obviously, that's something I've never obviously experienced. And I found it really interesting to see like what that dynamic is like, what you would deal with. And I loved watching sort of his diplomacy and how he really adapted to different people. But for me, yeah, the most interesting part was definitely like him having a father from one nation and a mother from another, and how does he deal with that, and how does he deal with other students. So I guess for him it was almost more plot character driven that I found interesting, more than like an internal. I mean, I guess that was internal though. He did always feel the conflict, I think, between Fodlan and the other country, I'll put the name in. He always felt that conflict. So that was the most interesting part to me, is how is he going to sort of navigate this situation. So that's Claude. Next, let's go on to 13 Sentinels. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. And the character, I actually thought all the characters were well written, so this was kind of like, I don't even know who to pick, but I put Juro just because I think the timeline stuff was, spoilers if I didn't do that, the timeline stuff was extremely interesting, and the whole like having the imaginary friend but it's actually Juro was also extremely interesting, and like how he is like an AI but also a human, and like, well, you know the ending, so it's just so it's fascinating. I don't know, I really liked his story. I was confused for a long time. Like I think I did figure it out before we figured it out, but it was not very soon before. Like it was like 5 minutes before I was like, light bulb, and then they revealed it, so it wasn't that impressive. But anyways, my point is it took me a long time, and I was very impressed with the writing. I was impressed with like the conflict he felt. I also thought there were a couple others. Really, it's really hard to pick off this because I think they were all written well. But a few of my favorites were him. I also really liked, I thought Ryoko Shinonome, she still stands out to me. I just thought the way they framed it was interesting. Again, I also always really like trauma and like figuring stuff out, and like the memory loss thing. I always find that kind of storyline interesting. So I really liked her story. And I'm like, they were all good, but it wasn't really like a conflict internally with the character that got me. It was more the plot. Sekigahara was another interesting one. He also had amnesia. So I definitely find that interesting. But anyways, I'll stick with that there. All right, let's go on to the next one. So for Ys 8, I thought one of the best written characters was Dana or Donna. And spoilers, here's why. I think her conflict was just so interesting because, you know, she comes from this extinct culture. She finds out like everything she's known and loved is gone. And she's from, and like she literally could have like chosen to not let humans live because her like people were already gone, but she still chose to. And I thought that was so cool. I thought her just the conflict throughout the whole story was so interesting of like, well, I don't think we knew why that was happening, but sort of seeing it happen, seeing her deal with like the realization that her society is gone was just so interesting and intriguing to me. And her deciding to leave everyone behind, that she like the new relationship she had built was also fascinating. I hope that Dana gets rescued in a future Ys game. So Falcom, if you could do that, that would be cool. Or if she rescues herself, that would be cool. Request from me. I don't know how that would happen within the story, because like obviously, you know, I don't think they would allow her to leave the council, if you will. But man, it would be cool. It would be cool. So on to the next one. We have Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4. I put a few I thought were interesting in here. I mean, this is another one kind of like Aegis Rim, where like the plot and the characters are so good that it's like, how do I even pick the best written character, you know, from that game? But I put a few. For me, I thought Ash was extremely interesting. I knew he obviously had issues, and he had been through a lot. Now, I hadn't played Trails in the Sky, so I didn't know about what happened to Joshua, right? So I found out about Joshua and Ash. I think it was a side quest. Like, I wouldn't have even known if I hadn't done the side quest, but you find out about their town being completely destroyed. And I remember I literally cried. Like, that really got to me. I also thought, you know, Ash, like the whole assassination thing and how he dealt with the after effects of that, fascinating. His anger and how he worked through that was also so interesting. yeah, I just found his character very intriguing. Like there was always more things to sort of peel back in Cold Steel 3 and 4, whereas like Muse, we kind of knew what was up with her at least a little bit. So I wasn't too surprised. Kind of the same thing with Yuna and Kurt. Kurt was the most flat character to me. I don't know what happened to Kurt, but Ash was just very interesting member of Class 7. I also put Osborne. I thought he was very intriguing. I think like, you know, him and Reen's relationship is just interesting, and sort of his thought process. It was a little weird to me, like, I don't know how he chose to drag it on for so long. Like I feel like there might have been a better way where he could have taken over that robot, but I think he couldn't show his thought process or something, if I'm remembering right. So yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting, like seeing him eventually be able to like help save Reen and the world and all of that, but like he went so long having to act like this other person, and he went through just so much. It was very interesting. I also thought Claire was really interesting, just because she has this dynamic with Reen where like there's clearly a connection there. She clearly has a conflict. This is kind of like, I think, Lecter too. She has a conflict about what she's doing, but she still chooses to do it anyway, and I found that really interesting also. So there you go. All right, next we have Trills from Zero. Everyone's written well in this one too, surprise, surprise. I think I thought that the doctor was very interesting because I actually did not see that twist coming. I did not see it coming. I don't know how I didn't see it coming. But I did not. So fail, but also like really cool to not know. I was mind blown. Like I think I tend to inherently trust like people who work in the mental health space. So I was like, what? So he was really interesting, kind of like seeing that character progression. And I also thought that, alright, sorry about that. I also thought that Lloyd was very interesting as a character. You know, just seeing his, sorry, let me move this. Seeing his background with his brother and just kind of like watching his character unfold over the course of the game and seeing him kind of come into his own as a police officer was cool. This one wasn't really a conflict driven reason for me. I just think his character was written extremely well. So I don't have as much to say about it, but I just really enjoyed it. 9. Adol is the person I think was written really well in this one, and here's why. So Adol, like, he had another, what is up with me and personality splits, you guys? I'm just thinking about it. I'm like, I think there's just something intriguing about it to me, but he kind of like, not really a personality split, as you know, he has a clone, but I could not figure that out for the longest time. Maybe I just didn't think about it enough, but yeah, I was like, okay, is this like, I kept thinking it was like flashbacks, right, to the prison and before he got out, and it took me quite a long time to figure out it was like something else was going on. Like I think it literally took me until the twist. I did not predict this one. I think Adol was written so well where I really was confused, and I'm calling it Adol and Adol. It's my little joke. I think he was written very well. I don't know if I should call it Adol and Adol 2, Adol the clone and Adol, or whatever, but that whole dynamic was fascinating. I really enjoyed it. I thought that was a cool twist by Falcom, for me personally. Next we have Triangle Strategy, and this was another one that was hard for me. But I put Frederica as the person I thought was the most well written. I just thought her background with her people and like her reasoning for fighting was really well thought out. And her and Serenoa's relationship and her reactions to Serenoa and like his actions I thought were really realistic. I thought she was written extremely well. that's the first route I chose in Triangle Strategy, was Sarah Noah picking. It was obviously a very tragic ending, but I thought it was very, very intriguing, and yeah, I really liked her character too, just in general, like the way they wrote her as a very idealistic, moral person, and she really picks the moral route, even no matter what she has to sacrifice. Kind of the opposite of someone like I won't say who, other characters I've mentioned on this list. She's kind of the opposite, I think, where she will sacrifice herself to do the right thing, if that makes sense, versus like she will do whatever it takes to do the right thing, even if sacrifices are made, versus I think other characters who will sacrifice anything to get to their goal that they believe is right. So it's kind of like a it's like two different versions of idealism, and she has the version I just mentioned. So I hope that made sense. That was kind of a weird explanation. Next we have Dragon Quest XI. Now you might think I'm gonna pick one of the main characters. Surprise, surprise. If you've been watching some of my other characters on here so far, it is not the main characters. I thought Hendrik and Jasper were the most interesting, especially Hendrik, because he is so loyal to a fault. He believes in the king. He's basically blinded by the king and his friendship with Jasper, and he will do anything, I think, to save them, really. And so it was fascinating watching him sort of eventually team up with our hero, who I don't think ever had a name, and sort of his character growth in part 2 of the story was really cool to see. I also thought him and Jasper's friendship was very interesting, where Jasper's basically always been jealous of Hendrik, but Hendrik sort of stays strong through it all and is still that good friend to Jasper. I'm still kind of sad about that scenario. Like, I'm still sad for Jasper, like, that he could never work through that envy and jealousy. Yeah, I still feel sad about that. It was so good. Like, I'm still sad right now. And I haven't played that game in like 2 years. Crazy. All right, next, now this is kind of cheating but kind of not, because I played this game on the PlayStation, but I know it's on Switch. So, and that game would be Persona 5. This one, everyone's written so well. Like, that's why the game is so good, I think. So this was a hard one too. And I did pick more than one, and I also put Royal as its own category. So I hope that's okay. That's what we did. So for Persona 5, I put Anne, as far as early on. I think she was written very well early on in the story. I thought her and Kamoshida, right? Yeah. I thought their situation was just so realistic to things that happen in real life. And I think it's something that's hard to talk about, right? And it's something that is unpleasant to talk about, but I think it's an issue in our society, and in Japanese society and other societies, that should be focused on more. And so I thought it was really well written. It was obviously pretty intense. I'm talking about Shida's dungeon also. I put Anne and Kamoshida as two characters I thought were interestingly written. So that whole situation was just fascinating. Anne was a very interesting character, like how she reacts. She's worried about her friend, but she also has this other situation going on. I think later on they kind of like stopped worrying about her character writing as much, so it wasn't as good, but the beginning, it was so strong. And same with Kamoshida. I thought he was a very interesting villain because he was so realistic to real life and how people like that, I think. And we really got to look into his psychology, and I just, yeah, hats off to the writers of this game. For Persona 5 Royal, I put Dr. Maruki. He's really interesting because, and Akechi. So to get into spoilers, I think Dr. Maruki's really interesting because he is another idealist who wants to like technically he's trying to help people feel less pain. And I 100% understand that. Like, I think less pain in the world is a good thing, obviously. But I do think that it's important for us as people to learn to deal with like negative emotions and like painful situations, right? I don't think it's ideal, but everyone has to kind of learn to do that to be like a healthy person in life. And so I think Maruki is kind of doing a version of like digging his head in the sand, but it's still so interesting, like how he chooses to do that, I guess. Yeah, it's interesting that he chooses to kind of like make that decision for everyone else, even though he's a psychologist. You know, yeah, I understand his tendency, but yeah, I think that's what's so fascinating. I understand his tendency, but he picks like a really weird option that you would probably say is evil, right? Like, because you're making this decision for most people. But again, it is a little morally gray because he asks everyone, is this what you want? And there is a scenario where you can choose yes, and then it's just what everyone wants. So like, is that wrong? I would still argue, I don't think that's how people were meant to live. But it's definitely morally gray in that he's not necessarily like making this choice alone. So very fascinating. Though obviously if you say no, he does fight you. So like, he's not really giving you the choice. So again, I could go on forever about that scenario. Akechi's interesting too, because he really is like a villain, but also an anti-hero. Do you know what I mean? Like, he definitely changes in this scenario. But again, I don't know how much of that was like because he was Dream Akechi and how much of that was like, you know, the hero's own hopes. But he was still just a fascinating character, no matter his motivations or reasoning. I really didn't see his actions coming for a long time either. He's a very likable character, but he clearly has a lot of anger and rage that he's hidden, and I just found that very, very well written and very fascinating. All right, very last one, and this is more of just a fun one because I just feel like I picked so many serious, well-written characters. But my last choice is Astral Chain Marie. If you played Astral Chain, you will know, like, she was just so entertaining and funny. I would just go up and talk to her randomly in the game. And she always had something going on, and she had like her own little storylines, and she was so funny. And so yeah, like, I don't know if Astral Chain had the best written characters in general, but that one was just a fun one. And I think they wrote her well. So, in sort of a comedic way. So let me know if you guys in the comments if you enjoyed this video. I might do another video like best written anime characters. I might do like best world building in JRPGs, but this one I really wanted to focus on the characters specifically. Do you agree? Did you like any of these characters? I'd love to know your thoughts. It's fun reading your comments. I do read all of them. So let me know below. And thank you guys. Consider liking and subscribing if you like my content, and I'll see you in the next video.